Joshua Smith here, and welcome to the GSD Mode podcast. Now get shit done and smash that subscribe button now. All right, what is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode podcast, real estate tip, and we are back with round number four, part number four in our REO and short sale series. Joined again with my good friend, Ben Barber, and here to drop some knowledge on you guys. Now, if you didn't hit or see part 1, 2, 3, and 4, those episodes, if you will, in this series were high level. I mean, those were, why it's important to get into REO and short sales, and how it recession proofs your business, and how it can be a great leg to your business, and so forth. Then we discussed a main overview of all the main kind of steps of REO and short sales. And then we talked about, our top tips and methods and advice to getting into REO and short sales, and then how to leverage those to create more business inside your business and so forth. Now we're going to start getting a little bit more detailed. And today we're going to be talking specifically to REO. You get an REO assignment, you go out there, you got to do your occupancy check. And then like two things are going to happen. Well, I guess there can be multiple different variances, but two main things are going to happen. Either the property is going to be vacant or it's going to be occupied, right? And then sometimes it's vacant, but there's personal property in there and so forth, that we got to do a personal property eviction and give it time if it's over a certain valuation amount and so forth. But today we're specifically going to go deep on in the event of when you're doing your occupancy check, if it's occupied, like how to handle that situation, how to I guess, first off, know if it's occupied and what to do if you don't know if it's occupied. If you can't tell, just some tips there. But then in addition to that, how to manage if it is occupied, so then that you can have success of getting that person out and getting that property vacant, which is the next important step. Those of you that don't know who Ben Barber is, if you haven't watched his other sessions, so Ben Barber, amazing friend of mine, also extremely successful realtor and team leader now in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. But in his previous life, his previous career, he was a senior asset manager and really involved in all the different departments over the years in the REO and outsourcer world, managing all these different departments, from cash for keys department to being an asset manager to then being a senior asset manager and developing so many of the systems that most of the big banks and institutions still use today. So why Ben and I love doing these together for you guys is he's got an inside look from the asset manager's point of view. And when you hear us say a bank owned or whether it's through the bank or through an outsourcer, the only difference is some banks manage their foreclosure departments in-house. REO just stands for real estate owned, which it means a foreclosure property. I don't know if this is true or not. I think it's just PR because real estate owned sounds better than saying foreclosure. So I think it's just a PR stunt, but I could be wrong there. But anyway, so bank owned, if it's managed through the banks, that means they're running the process internally. When we use the term outsourcer, that just means they're outsourcing that to a company that's handling that process for them. So everything else is pretty much the same. Processes are the same and so forth. So, Ben has that, insider knowledge, if you will, from the life of the asset management companies, the banks, the outsourcers, where I'm able to talk about it from being a top REO and short sale agent over the years from the agent perspective. So with that being said, Ben, let's just jump on in, dude, and going to lead off with you because, dude, I know that you led a cash for keys department. So,
Yep.
So you were in this world, not just as an asset manager and senior asset manager, but you were also managing evictions, managing cash for keys for tens of thousands of properties over the years and so forth. So I'm going to have you lead this off, dude, and just kind of walk us through your top tips, best practices, and so forth. So I guess it kind of starts with you got to do the occupancy check, right? So when you're doing the occupancy check, what are kind of some of the best practices, tips, methods that you've seen over the years to be able to know and identify if that property is indeed occupied?
Yeah, great question. So once again, thanks for having me. It's fun to jump in and talk about this stuff, especially having lived in it for so long. So yeah, I managed the eviction department for a couple of years, and that was an eye-opening experience to see 2,400 assets or so a month kind of move through our department. And we saw some key things. So I think the number one thing is to treat it with urgency. You know, when you fire off, you're going to get a task, and some, like if the company you're working with is not using a task-based system, then they're going to send you an email and they're going to say, hey, here's this property, it needs an occupancy inspection. And they're really looking for that to be done within 24 hours, because that starts the whole process. It's past redemption, it's past confirmation. Like, we need to know if the property is occupied or not, because it can impact the days in inventory so significantly. So the number one thing I would say is treat that with urgency and make that a priority, but then also reporting back correct information. Like, we did an audit and we found out that it was like 70% of occupancy inspections were reported back incorrectly. So we actually started the eviction process on properties that were vacant and spent, you know, $1,000 for our national eviction attorney that we didn't need to spend. And so that was a big hole within the process. So number one, make sure that you're going out quickly, but reporting back accurate information. And like you were talking about, one challenge that people are going to run into is, how do you determine that occupancy? You know, you've really got to be diligent with it. It's not just I'm going to go out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, see if anybody's there. If I don't get a response, then that's it. I'll call it owner occupied, or I'll call it unknown. It's, you know, varying the times that you're going to go out there and treating it. I always saw it as treating it just like a new lead that you get. If you get a new internet lead, we're not just going to call them one time and then forget about it. We're going to call in the morning, we're going to send an email, we're going to send a text, and we're going to follow up that same day. And then if we don't get a response, we may call 2 or 3 times, 4 times that first day trying to get a hold of somebody. It'd be the same thing. If I do an occupancy inspection in the morning and I can't verify occupancy, then I want to go back in the afternoon. I want to go back at night. I just want to vary the times that I'm doing it so I can report back accurate information. And then the things that we're looking for is, I'm always looking for signs of life, really. You're looking for cars in the driveway, cars that are moving, any kind of changes. Were the blinds open? Now are the blinds closed? I always look at, you know, is the electric meter running? Right. Some tips that we've had from some of the most successful agents is finding a way to deliver your information and then verify it's picked up. So like, if we're putting a door hanger on that's on yellow cardstock that may look like a utility notice or public, you know, some kind of public notice, that we put it on in the morning, we go back in the evening and that has been taken off the door, right? We can assume that somebody took it off the door, it's occupied. We had some very clever agents that would put their information on a sticker and then put that sticker up against the door and the frame, so that the only way you could open the front door was to break that, right? And then you could say, yes, the home has been occupied. So these are ways that if you're not able to make contact with a person directly, you can still report back to the outsourcers and say, yes, the property is occupied because I did A, B, and C. I put this flyer on the door, I went back, it was gone. I put the sticker up, it was gone. Those are strategies for if you're not making contact with the tenant or, you know, with the former occupant. But that's what I would do. We had one guy that, as crazy as it sounds, he couldn't get a hold of anybody, so he delivered pizza to the house, right? He just sent a couple pepperoni and cheese pizzas over to the house. Somebody was there, they picked it up. He got confirmation. He's like, yeah, it's occupied. I don't know who, but it is occupied. And that's the most important thing, is to get an accurate reading, because now it gives you time to make contact. If it's occupied and we complete that occupancy inspection within the first 24 hours, now we're going to have different tasks like offer cash for keys, you know, get the lease agreement if it's tenant occupied. We're going to have different things that will buy us a little bit of time to then make contact and get information from the occupants. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to throw onto there for occupancy checks, just to determine if somebody's actually there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love all the points that you brought up. You know, I mean, really at the end of the day, it's being diligent on it. Yeah, right. Because look, I mean, most of the time we get an assignment, it's going to be between 9 and 5 or whatever. You know, when people working hours of us and the asset managers, well, that's also usually working hours for regular people. So it's middle of the day when you go, you get a new property, might immediately go out there, do the occupancy check. You know, their likelihood of them not being home is probably very high during the middle of the day. So being diligent with it, you know, one thing, and most banks will instruct this of you, or outsource will instruct this of you. Before you knock on that door, have your postings on the front door, right? Tape everything up, have your postings, take, you know, date stamp photo of that, time stamp photo of that, so they can see that before you knock and hand them on there. Because you got to show proof of those, the notices were posted, then do your knocking. And then if they're there, hand it to them. And then we'll talk about how to handle those conversations here in a minute. Nobody's answering. It's been said, man, be diligent, man. You know, try look through all the windows, look through, you know, turn on the hose spigot, see if, as Ben called it, signs of life. I mean, it's some of the stuff might be in the gray areas. I don't know how much some of this stuff is allowed, but right? Like I'd go in the backyard, jump if there was no dogs in the backyard, jump the wall if I needed to, or if I couldn't access the gate to see if I could get a better view inside. Because at this point, it's your client's property now.
Right.
Essentially you have I don't want to say a squatter, but somebody in your client's property, and we need to be able to verify that. So going above and beyond with that. The only thing I could say in addition to what Ben said, that I've been able to get a lot of insight over the years is knocking on the neighbors' doors too. Because they see what's going on in the mornings and the evenings, and seeing if they've seen any signs of life or anybody there and so forth. I've got a lot of great insight over the years from that as well.
Yep.
So then, once it's occupied, Ben, and let's just say you knock on the door, they're there, or at some point you're having a conversation with whomever it is that's occupying the property. What are the next steps? Like, how do what's, because again, you've handled so many cash for keys over the years, and I have as well, but nothing with the volume that you did, because you ran a whole department managing these from all over the nation. Right? So what are kind of some of your top tips and your top agents that seem to have the highest success rates with having successful cash for keys doing?
Yeah, great question. So I think that, when I was at Green River, we were the first ones that actually set up a specific cash for keys team and treated them like individual asset managers. So we had our eviction coordinators, and then we had our cash for keys coordinator, and their job specifically was to work with the agents to negotiate. And, we went into it with the mindset of cash for keys is the best possible option for these people. And we are helping them move on with their life. It's a great service. It's a great program, because at the end of the day, the bank is going to take that property. I mean, the bottom line is 99% of the time, it's going to be taken back, and it's going to be taken back either through a voluntary vacate, which would be the cash for keys, or we're going to have the sheriff out there. We're going to change the locks. We're going to take all of their stuff. We're going to put it on the curb. It's going to be a hassle. It's going to be embarrassing. So if we come at it from this standpoint of, I am here to serve, right? Like, I'm serving my client, number one, but I'm offering you a lifeline. Like, that's the biggest challenge, I think, is that a lot of these people, like, we have to be empathetic to what the situation is, because we don't know what's going on. We've had people where we go knock on the door, and the wife had no idea that the home was being foreclosed on, because the husband was managing the money and he was too embarrassed to tell her. So out of the blue, she's getting this knock saying, hey, by the way, the bank owns the property. You're in eviction now. Like, these are moments where now you're messing with someone's certainty, because we're saying, we don't have this property anymore, and it throws a wrench into their plans. So if we have this solution, that's why I love the cash for keys. We have this solution that says, look, this is a win-win. We're going to help you move on. Here's all we need, and it protects the banks. It decreases our days in inventory, but it protects the asset from damage, because in order to get that cash for keys check, property has to be in broom swept condition. They can't take, the carpet out, the cabinets out. They can't damage the property. So, but I think number one is being empathetic, because we don't know the situation that they're in. We don't know if it's owner occupied at first, or if it's tenant occupied. And if it's tenant, it's tough, because they may have. I know back in 2008. We had some really shady real estate agents that would go out and they would rent a foreclosed property to somebody, take that deposit, and disappear. So now somebody's paid a deposit after the foreclosure date, they move in, and now all of a sudden they're getting this knock on the door saying, hey, by the way, this property is foreclosed, you need to move out. So if we're empathetic, but also being professional, right? Like, we don't want to run down the road of letting somebody tell us how hard their life is and getting sucked into that. I think that's the fine line that agents have to walk, is to be able to be empathetic to the situation they're in, but still, I have a job to do. I need to vacate this property for the bank. Now let's find a way that works. So, with the cash for keys, really the best thing to do is to explain that process, and explain it in a way that it actually works for them. We have, I used to do a cash for keys presentation, and we basically say, because you're asking somebody to move out of the property. So if we go up and we say, okay, show of hands, if I offered you guys $1 million cash today, how many people would vacate their property in 24 hours? Just turn everything over. It'd be like, show of hands, how many people would do that? And I'm in a room of agents, and we'd say, 70 to 90% of people would raise their hands, because I guess some people live in a more expensive house, but the majority of people would be like, yeah, give me $1 million and I'm out of the house. $1 million is completely unrealistic for a cash for keys, but what we're doing is we're getting them to admit that for the right price, they would leave their home today, right? And then we start working backwards, because a lot of these people that we're working with, may never have seen $5,000 all up front. They may not have seen a $7,500 check. And there's different levels depending, like, VA for a veteran owned property will go up to $10,000. If the property's been on the market a long time, you can see $10,000, $15,000 cash for keys checks. So it's working with them to say, look, there's a number in here that will, that will facilitate you vacating the property. We need to come up with what that number is. And then you're just negotiating from that point. But I like the build rapport part. I mean, when you're being empathetic, but then you come off as a professional and you're giving them their options. And that's why I say understanding that the bank is going to take the property back one way or another. It's helping somebody understand why this is a good option for them, what their options are. Like, yeah, we can go through evictions. It takes about 6 months in our state, but eventually they're going to take it back. This is a win-win. So you do have to bring in your rapport skills, your negotiation skills. But I like that you're offering solutions. Cash for keys is a solution, right? I always used to tell people, work with property management companies that know that somebody is coming off of an eviction or a foreclosure and may not have the best credit. But if we can get a cash for keys check that's 2 months deposit, do you have a property management company you're working with that will take that and take somebody with bad credit and be able to transition them into a house? Do you have, we talk about home partners. Home partners is someone that will work with somebody, foreclosure, there's no seasoning on a foreclosure. So can we transition someone in a rent to own property and have them save some face because they're going from one home to another home and not going to move with family? And because the neighborhood starts talking, so-and-so just is losing their house. But if they can save some face and transfer to another home in the same neighborhood so their kids can go to the same school, they don't have to start their life all over. These are some solutions that you can bring to the table that will help facilitate that vacancy a little more. Just, being empathetic, offering solutions, building rapport, but at the end of the day, being a professional and guiding people through the process. Because that's what's going to help, I think, once you're, we talk about like what to do if it's an occupied property. Well, you've got to do your weekly check. And if you're building that rapport, the likelihood of you vacating that property peacefully and avoiding the full eviction lockout increases exponentially. So that's what I have for that.
Yeah, I love it, man. So, a couple things there just to kind of piggyback on. Number one, you guys read. I highly, highly, highly recommend. I think it's one of the best, hands down, foundational books for all of us in real estate. And I think it's a great book for anybody. It doesn't matter if you're in sales or not. But How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That is like the playbook, the Bible, if you will, for human connection and human rapport. And even though it was written in the 1930s, man, it's more relevant today than ever before. And it's going to help you tremendously in all elements of your business. Traditional lead gen, lead follow-up, networking, but also, for those of their team leaders, brokerage owners, with your agents, and also in this scenario that Ben's talking about, because it's all about that connection rapport. So highly recommend to read that book. It'll help you. The title says it all: How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? So then from there, make sure that you know your client's guidelines. So what I mean by that is okay, well, what are the stipulations that they offer? What are the cash for key options that they have? What are the time frames and so forth? Ben had mentioned VA. Well, over the years of myself doing REO, I never got in with VA or had a VA account specifically. But here's the thing, dude, is word travels fast, right? Like in 2008, when the foreclosures really started popping up, the word wasn't out there about cash for keys. So right. I got a lot of people to accept it. They were happy with it and whatever. Well, then all of a sudden, a year later, they're hearing it from other friends, other people that they know, conversations are taking place. They're hearing, oh, well, this person got $5,000, this person got $10,000. Well, my client, the bank that I'm representing, they might have a max of 2,000. That might be their max, right? And in order to get that max, you have to be vacated, and there's going to be stipulations of what needs to be left in the property, and being broom swept condition, and it's got to be done in 14 days, right, to get that $2,000. If it goes, to 3 weeks, boom, it's cut here. If it goes to 4 weeks, it's cut here. Right. So, but knowing those stipulations, because some of these banks, and I have many bank clients over the years that dude, they are hardcore on their guidelines. There is no negotiating with those guidelines, right? The more, sometimes when people would need 30 days to get out with certain banks, it was okay, we'll give them 30 days, but they're getting $0, right? For that. So just know what your client stipulations are when it comes to that. That has been said, man, that rapport and connection is huge, you guys. You got to understand that there's going to be a lot of different situations and a lot of different scenarios. You're going to knock on some of these doors and talk to some occupants that are indeed the homeowners. They know what's going on. They know what's up, whatever, but that's still a tough position, man. Like nobody planned on getting their home foreclosed on. It's, they kind of got gut punched, and whether they're taking personal responsibility or not, you never know the story. They could be facing a severe hardship. We never truly know their situation and story, right? And plus, like in the Great Recession, the Great Housing Market crash, right? You saw all these, huge banks and all these big businesses getting bailed out, and a lot of the consumers, just regular people that were getting foreclosed on, they felt, absolutely shit on by the banks and the government, because there's no bailout for just regular America, if you will. So just understand that, right? There's also a lot of times where you go to the property and it's a tenant and the landlord never told them. Right. So you don't always know what you're stepping into and so forth, right? So as Ben talked about, man, that connection, that rapport is huge, right? Well, how do you develop a connection rapport? Man, by being empathetic and being compassionate. And there's a big difference between empathy and sympathy, right? Sympathy is, okay, if somebody's in quicksand and they're sinking, sympathy is, oh my gosh, and you jump in there with them and you try to save them. Empathy is, man, that sucks. I'm not going to jump in there with you. Like, I feel bad for your situation. That sucks. Let me throw you a rope so you can pull yourself out. Yeah. Right. So being empathetic, being compassionate, being a good listener, right. Just not being an asshole, right. Listening to them, and so forth, and trying to handle that scenario and situation, but also educating, like when you know your client stipulations and so forth, like you educate on what's going to happen, what the process is, and why it's important. This is where sales comes in, and we got to sell the importance of why taking this cash for keys is in their best interest, right? And if they don't take this serious, here's what can happen. I've had properties where we've done had to go all the way through the eviction, and Ben kind of alluded to this before, but next thing you know, man, they didn't take it serious. They called our bluff, did everything that we could to get them to take it serious, but they didn't. Next thing you know, we're out there with sheriffs, guns drawn, changing the doors, moving companies out, and having to just physically remove them, all their belongings. I've had to impound cars. I've had to bring pets and have the pets delivered to the pound. Right? Like shit that I don't want to do that. I mean, think how I felt having to do that. I mean, I felt terrible having to do that, right? They don't want to go through that and whatever, but communicating the severity of this, right? In such a way though of, I don't want to say necessarily like you're on their side, but you're kind of that neutral party, right? Of look, I'm here to do everything I possibly can to help you out. I'm so sorry about your situation. I'm so sorry that this is taking place. Everything that you've shared with me, man, I can't even fathom what you and your family are going through. And I hate hearing that, and I'm here to do everything I can to support you through this and be a resource and be helpful in any way that I can through this. But just so you know, here's what the bank's guidelines and standards are, and here's what they're going to do, right? Like this is what's going to happen with them, right? So kind of approaching from that neutral party. So they have that awareness, but you're there with them, and they feel like you're listening. They feel like you care. That's the biggest thing, with that. But, also explaining in the reality of the situation, what's going on. And then the last thing, you guys, and again, Ben alluded to this as well, but being a proactive problem solver, being resourceful, being a problem solver, with helping them with their scenario, right? Because again, they're going to be in a lot of times a case of stress, a case of overwhelm, right? Kind of their creative mental juices in their brain, they're not going to be able to tap into because they're just in so much fear and anxiety and stress and an overwhelmed state where they may not be able to get the obvious, right? So, presenting options, rental options, what this stuff can look like, presenting, like Ben talked about, home partners, other options that exist, can exist out there, and just presenting those options and helping them solve these options. Because at the end of the day, what matters most to the banks, I mean, yeah, they want to get the highest that they can for these properties and so forth, but time is essential to them. From the moment that they take over that property, meaning that foreclosure is official, like, dude, the ticker is on.
Yep.
Yeah, right. So like, we need to get this process and do everything we can to get this process moving forward to get this home off their books successfully as soon as possible. And dude, this is a world where days matter. You know, right? It's not it's just a couple days. Well, a couple days, like if every single asset is extended by 3 days, you know, right? For all the assets of the closing of the years, that can crush your clients. You know, so having that urgency and so forth, all of those things become crucial. And those are kind of the important things that I have. I don't know if you have any last words to add, Ben.
No, I love that you hit on the time being essential, because we did a study years ago that the average holding cost per asset for a bank is roughly $30 a day is what it's costing them to maintain, just really to have that asset on their books. And so you and I may look at that and we're like, all right, $30 a day, that's not a big deal. But when you have, 15, well, I guess when you have 5,000 assets, 10,000 assets at $30 a day, that's a big deal. And you're spending a ton of money just in holding costs. And it's affecting the bottom line. And we've talked about it in other things, but outsourcers can actually be penalized and have to pay their clients money if the average, days in inventory or days on market exceeds a certain amount. So it's and then they get bonused if they stay under something. So it's incentive for everybody. But one thing I wanted to add on to, because I love your analogy of the quicksand. Like, that was fantastic. That's 100% accurate. And I had learned this from some of the, Utah's like a haven for multi-level marketing. So I learned this from some Amway guys years ago, but they were the best at presenting and understanding a situation when they walked into a house, because people would take off, like, depending on the house size, they would not wear their $40,000 Rolex into the house, right? They wouldn't wear their big shiny diamond ring. Like, I may not take my Tesla to go do a cash for keys. Depending on the area, I'll take my Ford Edge. It's like, in addition to being that, How to Win Friends and Influence People, 100%, great book to read, but also mirroring the place that you're going to, because they're going to see you initially as a representative of the bank. And if they think you're making too much money, well, you're part of the system that's trying to take advantage of them. And that's not true. You've got to diffuse that. And being able to have that fall back where you're just a mediator. You're like, yeah, I understand, but here's all my client will allow me to do. It's a lot easier than trying to make a decision with your own money or making it seem like, if they talk to you nice enough, you're going to give them money out of your pocket. That's just not how it works. So I love it, man. I think you hit some really good things.
Yep, 100%. All right, you guys. Well, if you haven't watched the other episodes in this series, we're gonna have links below. Highly recommend that you watch those. Each one of these kind of builds off of each other. We're gonna continue this series for some time here, just to make sure that you guys have the information that you need to be prepared for having success when it comes to getting into REO and short sales. And one of the biggest myths out there is that this stuff only applies during market crashes, during down markets. A lot of agents right now are thinking that this stuff is applicable because the market's so hot, at least at the time of us creating this video or this episode on January 21st, 2021. Look, low inventory, market's hot, prices are going up. REO and short sales is really not on a lot of agents' minds. But the reality is it's something that always exists because it's due to hardships. Right? People are having hardships, good times, bad times, and so forth. And then, it becomes more relevant, and there can be a higher amount of this type of business during market corrections, and so forth. But it really allows you to have a consistent another revenue stream and business stream inside your business at all times, right? But then during market crashes like 2008 through 2012, let's just say, it allows you to recession-proof your business. Right? When the market shifts and turns, man, and traditional business happening less and less, it allows you to continue to grow and expand your business. Just because the economy is going through an adjustment or recession or depression doesn't mean that you and your business need to be. And that's why we're doing this series, man, to make sure that you guys are prepped and educated on this. Now, if you guys are looking for some more in-depth advanced training on this, Ben, Barber, and myself created a program called REO University. There's going to be a link below that you can check out, learn more about the program. It is a paid training program, but we walk you through A to Z of everything from REO as well as short sales. And in there, we're walking you through doing live property inspections, doing actual BPOs step by step, and all of the things that you need to know at an extremely high level to have massive success. So if you're looking to, take this, your knowledge to the next level and truly master this, so you can go out there and crush it in this arena, go check out that link below in the comments. And we'll have this in the comments as well, but make sure to use the promo code that we put in there, because that will save you $500. So it's a huge discount over like 30% So it'll save you $500 and give you a savings there. And as always, Ben, truly appreciate you being here with us and taking time out of your day to be here, dude.
Yeah, pleasure to be here, man. Thanks for taking the time. It's good stuff.
Yep, 100%. All right, you guys, as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your support. Keep up the amazing work. Keep kicking ass, and we will see you next time. Peace.
All right, see you guys.
I hope you enjoyed this GSD Mode podcast episode. Now make sure you get shit done and smash that subscribe button now.